Imagine this. You're sitting by the lake at sunrise, fishing on your grandfather's old dock, sipping coffee that tastes like peace itself. The water is calm, the air smells like pine, and for a moment the world feels perfect. Then, out of nowhere, police sirens break the silence. Blue lights flash across your cabin walls. An officer steps out and says, "Sir, you're under arrest for trespassing on your own property." What would you do if this happened to you? You fight back, stay quiet, or let someone else decide your future. I wasn't supposed to end up at Lake Serenity, not really. Life had already handed me 20 years in military logistics, 3 deployments that aged me faster than they should have, and a divorce that stripped me down to the studs. When my grandfather's cabin in Minnesota landed in my lap, I didn't think of it as a gift, a relic from another man's dream. But the moment I stepped out of my truck and smelled that pine-scented air, I knew this was where my life was meant to restart. The cabin itself wasn't much to look at. Tan Ephraim from the 1960s. Cedar siding, weathered gray, windows that rattled when the wind blew hard enough. No. 2 acres of woods wrapped around it like a protective blanket. Out back, the lake shimmered like a mirror, the surface so still at dawn that you could mistake it for glass. Every morning loons called across the water, their cries echoing like ghosts of the past. It wasn't paradise in the flashy sense. It was paradise because it was simple. I had my coffee ritual. Just me, the dock, and the rising sun. The boards had been sanded smooth by decades of weather, and boots mostly, my grandfather's. I'd sit there, coffee steaming, watching the mist curl across the lake until the sun burned it away. And in those quiet mornings, I forgot about everything. Wife, lawyers, diesel fumes, the whole mess of my old life. Lake Serenity had a code. It wasn't written down anywhere, but everybody knew it. Wave when you pass. Help when someone's in trouble. And most importantly, mind your own damn business. It worked. Neighbors kept their distance, unless you needed them, and when you did, they showed up with jumper cables or a casserole. There was peace here, the kind you couldn't buy with money or fake with some HOA rulebook. For 2 years, it was perfect. And then she arrived. Brenda Carmichael. I remember the first time I saw her. I was sipping coffee on my dock when I heard the sound of a pontoon boat bigger than anything else on the lake, its oversized motor growling like a chainsaw. It cut through the calm water, tearing up the silence I'd come to treasure. Yoo-hoo? "Hello there, neighbor." Her voice carried across the water like a tax collector knocking on your door. Sweet on the surface, but sharp underneath. She wore blindingly white capris, a pastel cardigan so bright it could have signaled aircraft, and a smile that belonged on a used car lot. Her boat nosed up to my dock like she owned the place. "I'm Brenda Carmichael," she said, waving like she was running for office. "From the executive estate across the way." Executive estate? I almost laughed. Round here, people just called it the McMansion. A hulking $800,000 house that looked as out of place in the woods as a Vegas casino. "I'm here on official HOA business," she added, pulling out a manila folder like she was hosting a game show. HOA business, set my coffee down hard enough that the mug rang against the wood. What homeowners association? I asked. Her plastic smile cracked for the first time, just for a second. The one protecting our property values, she said, voice cold as January lake ice. And I'm afraid your rustic setup isn't meeting community standards. That aluminum boat has to go. And frankly, the fishing gear scattered around makes the whole area look like a bait shop exploded. Asterisk, I stared at her. My declining influence, as she called it, was my grandfather's hand-carved rod holders and a tackle box older than she was. That aluminum boat had caught more fish than her floating living room ever would. Asterisk, this property has been in my family since before you were born, I told her. There's no HOA covenant on my deed, and there sure as hell won't be. Her smile disappeared completely. We'll see about that, won't we, soldier boy? She snapped, voice suddenly stripped of sugar. Asterisk, she revved the engine like she was fleeing a crime scene, the wake slamming into my dock hard enough to spill my coffee. As the smell of gasoline and perfume mixed with the clean pine air, I knew one thing for certain. Asterisk, this wasn't just some neighborly disagreement. This was the beginning of a war. Asterisk, for the next few days I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was bluffing. Maybe she'd back down. But then, 3 days later, I came home to find an envelope taped to my front door like a scarlet letter. Asterisk, inside was a violation notice. A fine of $500 for failure to maintain dock aesthetic standards, with a warning of further penalties and potential liens if I didn't comply. Asterisk, the letterhead looked official, expensive seals, case numbers, legal jargon meant to scare people into compliance. But I knew paperwork when I saw it, and this was theater. Asterisk, I'd seen it before, in the army, in the divorce courts. When people don't have real power, they hide behind paper. Asterisk, still. It rattled me. Asterisk, I sat on the dock that night, staring across the water at the McMansion. Its windows glowed in the dark like a predator watching from the trees. The smell of pine, usually comforting, now mixed with something sour in my gut. Asterisk, my grandfather used to tell me, before you fight City Hall, make sure you know who actually runs the city. I took a long breath of that cool night air. This wasn't just about a letter. This was about control. And Brenda Carmichael had just drafted me into a battle I hadn't asked for. Asterisk, the morning after that bogus violation notice, I drove into town with a knot in my stomach and a folder under my arm. Inside were copies of my DAD, old tax records, and even my grandfather's handwritten notes about the property lines. I'd learned long ago that if you're walking into battle, you don't show up empty-handed. Asterisk, the Cedar Falls courthouse wasn't exactly grand. It was a squat brick building with fluorescent lights that buzzed like a beehive, and a lobby that smelled of coffee gone stale, sometime in 1987. The basement held the county records office, a place where paper went to die and secrets went to hide. Asterisk, that's where I met Dolores. Asterisk, she was a county clerk, pushing 70, hair set in tight curls, glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. Her hands trembled from arthritis, but when she flipped through files, they moved faster than a Vegas card dealer. Asterisk, another HOA victim, huh? She said in a voice like gravel wrapped in honey. Asterisk, I blinked. You've seen this before? Asterisk, she nodded, pulling my property file from a drawer. That Carmichael woman's been in here 6 times this month, asking about enforcement procedures, lien authority, like she's running the county from her living room. Asterisk, I leaned on the counter. Does she have any authority here? Asterisk, Dolores chuckled. Sweetheart, she doesn't know her ass from her elbow when it comes to property law. She tapped the file. Your deed's clean. No covenants, no restrictions, no HOA. Asterisk, relief washed over me, but only for a moment, because if Brenda had no authority, then why the fancy notices? Why the legal-sounding threats? I started digging. Turns out the Lake Serenity Homeowners Association was real, sort of. It had been incorporated just 18 months earlier with exactly 12 members out of 47 properties. Legally speaking, they had as much power over my land as the neighborhood raccoons. But while I flipped through ownership records, something else caught my eye. Several lakefront properties had recently transferred to Carmichael Holdings LLC. That set off alarms in my head. I'd spent too many years in logistics not to recognize a pattern. One entity buying multiple properties, one loud voice trying to dictate rules, one sudden shift in power. It wasn't random. I pulled out my phone and started digging online. Within minutes, the truth unfolded. Brenda wasn't just trying to play Queen of the Lake. She was running an unlicensed vacation rental business. Those cabins she protected were being rented out on weekend websites to tourists from the Twin Cities. Parties, loud music, beer cans floating in the water. The hypocrisy hit me like a punch. She was lecturing me about declining property values, while she was the one actually destroying them. That night, I sat on my dock, watching the mansion lights across the lake. Every window glowed like a warning. The air smelled of pine and lake water. But it carried something else now, a sense of danger. I decided to test the waters. I logged onto Facebook and wrote one simple post. Has anyone else received violation notices from the Lake Serenity HOA? Asking for educational purposes. My phone blew up within an hour. 8 different neighbors messaged me privately. Each had their own Brenda horror story. One woman had been threatened with fines over her bird feeder. Young family got a warning about the color of their mailbox. Even 90-year-old Florence, who could barely see over her walker, had been accused of violating community standards because she left her porch light on too late. Then came Janet, retired librarian, glasses thicker than her patience for nonsense. She had been documenting Brenda's every move in a 3-ring binder: dates, times, photos, copies of letters. She treated it like a personal research project. Tom from the marina chimed in too. He had pictures of bounced checks and unpaid fuel bills from Brenda's boat. It was like watching puzzle pieces fall into place. Brenda wasn't just a difficult neighbor, she was running a campaign of intimidation. I created a group chat and called it the Lake Serenity Truth Squad. If we were going to fight crazy, we might as well embrace the comic book drama. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered, and her voice slid through the line like honey laced with poison. Marcus, sweetie, she purred. I saw your adorable little Facebook post. You're making this unnecessarily difficult for yourself. Just asking questions, Brenda, I said. Neighborly curiosity. Her tone dropped, sharp as broken glass. Oh, honey, you really don't want to go down this road with me? I have connections you couldn't even imagine. Keep this up and I'll report you for harassment and cyberbullying. Then she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, the lake glowing with sunset outside my window. She wanted me scared, intimidated, alone, instead. She'd just done the one thing she shouldn't have. She'd united me with my neighbors. That night, the Truth Squad traded stories late into the evening. Every tale painted the same picture. Brenda was a bully with a taste for paperwork and a talent for manipulation. But bullies have weaknesses, and thanks to Dolores, Janet, and Tom, we now had her pattern, her tactics, and her motive. As I closed my notebook, I remembered something my grandfather used to say, The trick isn't just knowing your enemy's game, it's knowing they're desperate enough to keep playing it. Brenda thought she was building an empire, but all I saw was someone cornered, fighting with paper swords. And I knew exactly what to do with paper. Tuesday morning, just after sunrise, I was on my dock with a cup of coffee when the crunch of gravel announced a visitor. A county pickup rolled into my driveway. white paint chipped, logo faded from too many winters. Out stepped a man in his 50s, with a clipboard under his arm. He wore the weary look of someone who spent too much time explaining obvious things to unreasonable people. Asterisk morning, he said, adjusting his cap. I'm Tom Hendriss's county code enforcement. Got a complaint to follow up on? Asterisk, I didn't. Need to ask who filed it? Asterisk. Let me guess, I said. My doc is a menace to society. Asterisk, he sighed. Something like that. Reports of non-compliant structure and an abandoned vehicle on the property. Asterisk, I almost laughed. My dock was older than most of the houses on the lake, but built solid. The so-called abandoned vehicle was a rusted canoe my grandfather left leaning against a pine tree. Asterisk still, I invited him down to the lake. That's how my grandfather raised Mew. Stay civil. Even when the world's being stupid. Asterisk, Tom pulled out his tape measure and checked every dimension of the dock twice. He scribbled notes, frowned, then finally closed the clipboard with a snap dot asterisk between you and me. He muttered, lowering his voice, though nobody was around. This is the 23rd complaint I've had from the same address in 6 months. Lady's got the county office on speed dial. Asterisk, I poured him a cup of real coffee, not the battery acid they serve in county offices. He accepted with a grateful nod. We sat on the porch steps, while the lake stretched quiet in front of us. Asterisk, that woman, Tom said, tried slipping me $100 last month. Called it a consulting fee for creative interpretations of building codes. Asterisk, I nearly spit. My coffee? She tried to bribe you. Asterisk, he shrugged. Didn't take it, of course. But it tells you what kind of game she's playing. Asterisk, I leaned back against the porch rail, the pine boards warm from the morning sun. Brenda wasn't just bossy. She wasn't just power-hungry. She was testing the waters for something darker - corruption. Asterisk, my grandfather used to say. You can judge a person by how they treat service workers and county clerks. By that measure, Brenda Carmichael failed with flying colors. Asterisk, that evening, I met with the Truth Squad. We gathered at Janet's place, cozy cabin lined with bookshelves, and the faint smell of cinnamon tea. She opened her binder on the table like it was evidence at a trial. Asterisk, here's everything I've documented, she said, flipping through pages of neatly typed notes and photographs. It's dates, times, specific complaints, even her tone of voice. When she called, Asterisk, Tom from the marina chimed in. She owes me $3,200 in unpaid dock fees. When I demanded payment, she threatened to sue me for discrimination. Asterisk, another neighbor, Florence, 90 years old, sharp as a tack at her piece. She's renting out those cabins to kids from the cities. Loud parties, beer cans in the lake. Calls the sheriff on me for my porch light, but ignores her renters. Blasting music until 3 a.m. Asterisk, the stories piled higher than Janet's binder. It was a pattern. Brenda bullied, intimidated, and cheated anyone she couldn't control. Asterisk, we decided to see her in action. Asterisk, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting at her mansion. We showed up as observers, which in Brenda's mind probably felt like enemy scouts at her gates. Asterisk, her great room looked like a furniture catalog had exploded gold trim. Beige sofas, crystal chandelier. 6 people sat in folding chairs, most of them property managers tied to her rental operation. They looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Asterisk, Brenda stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation titled, Protecting Our Community Investment. Pie charts flashed on the screen. Photos of non-compliant properties appeared, all of them belonging to residents who had refused to join her HOA. Asterisk, Janet scribbled notes furiously, her pen scratching like a reporter in a courtroom. I watched Brenda closely. She kept glancing at her Rolex, fidgeting like she was waiting for someone. Asterisk, during a bathroom break, Janet followed discreetly and overheard a phone call. Later, she told us exactly what Brenda had hissed into the receiver. Asterisk, I told you the payments are coming. These people are more stubborn than we expected, but I've got new strategies. Legal pressure, code enforcement, whatever it takes. Asterisk, the pieces clicked. Brenda wasn't just power drunk, she was under financial pressure. Someone was squeezing her, and she was trying to squeeze us. Asterisk, I'd seen the same thing in the military. When people are cornered financially, they make desperate moves. They cross lines they never thought they'd cross. Asterisk, the question was, who was holding Brenda's leash? Da 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 da. Asterisk, I started digging into her lawyer, the same man who'd mailed me that threatening cease and desist letter. His specialty wasn't real estate or community law. It was foreclosure, defense, and debt collection. It told me everything I needed to know. Asterisk, Brenda wasn't a queen guarding her kingdom. She was a drowning woman, clawing at anyone nearby to keep herself afloat. Asterisk. So I filed my own complaint. Harassment, false reports, misuse of county resources. Two could play the paperwork game, and I'd spent 20 years navigating military bureaucracy. Asterisk. Then I went further. I contacted the actual owner of her mansion through the property management company. Northwoods Properties was very interested. To hear that their tenant was running an unauthorized rental business out of their $1 million home, the first crack had formed in her empire, and as the sun set over the lake that night, waves tapping against the dock, I felt something I hadn't felt since this whole mess started. Hope Brenda had built her kingdom on intimidation and fake authority. But kingdoms built on lies don't stand long, and now, for the first time, the cracks were showing. The envelope showed up on a Wednesday afternoon, slipped into my rusty mailbox with all the casualness of junk mail. But I knew immediately this wasn't junk. Heavy cream paper, bold lettering across the top, District Court of Pine County, asterisk, carried it inside, like it was radioactive. Sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling in the mug, and tore it open. Asterisk inside was a summons. Brenda Carmichael v. Marcus Hale. Asterisk, the accusations read like a bad comedy routine. Trespassing, unlawful use of property, violation of association bylaws. Never mind that it was my grandfather's land. Never mind that I had the deed framed on the wall. Brenda had decided to drag me into court. Asterisk, for a long minute, I just stared at the papers, the words swimming, my stomach twisted in that old familiar knot I hadn't felt since deployment, the knot that comes when you realize the next fight isn't one you chose. Asterisk, I called Janet first. She answered on the second ring. Asterisk, she finally did it, I said. Took me to court. Asterisk, there was silence on the other end. Then the sound of pages flipping. She had her binder open. I knew it. Marcus, she said, voice steady. She's overplayed her hand. Don't panic. This is where it all turns. I wasn't so sure. The next week, I found myself sitting in the courthouse waiting room. Polished floors squeaking under nervous shoes, the faint smell of disinfectant and burnt coffee in the air. Across from me sat Brenda, dressed in a blazer. So stiff it looked painful, lips pursed like she'd already won. Her lawyer, a thin man with a cheap suit and an expensive briefcase, whispered in her ear. Asterisk, she wouldn't look at me, but her body language screamed satisfaction. This was her theater, and I was the villain she'd written into her play. Asterisk, the bailiff finally called us in. The courtroom was small, no grand chandeliers, no towering ceilings, just wood-paneled walls and the flag hanging limp behind the judge's bench. Asterisk, Judge Wilson, a man in his 60s, with half-moon glasses perched on his nose, shuffled through paperwork as though he'd rather be fishing. He looked up, gave a quick nod, and called the case. Asterisk, Brenda's lawyer went first. He rose with the drama of a man auditioning for Broadway. Your Honor, he began, this is a matter of protecting a community from unlawful intrusion. My client, Mrs. Carmichael, represents the Lakeshore Association, tasked with upholding order and safety. Mr. Hale has repeatedly ignored regulations, refused to comply, and continues to use the property in ways detrimental to the neighborhood. Asterisk. Clenched my fists under the table. Lies rolled off his tongue, smooth as honey. Then it was my turn. I stood, the paper in my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from fury. Your Honor, I said, voice as steady as I could make it, this woman has no legal claim over my property. I have here the original deed from my grandfather, filed and recorded in this very county. I have tax receipts, maintenance records, and photographs proving my family's ownership for over 50 years. The so-called association she represents doesn't legally exist in relation to my land. Asterisk. Judge Wilson held out his hand. I walked forward, placed the deed in his grasp. He studied it, eyebrows knitting. Asterisk. Mr. Hale, he said slowly, this seems in order. Can you explain how Mrs. Carmichael believes she has jurisdiction here? Asterisk. That was the moment Brenda broke her silence. She stood abruptly, ignoring her lawyer's tug on her sleeve. Asterisk. This man, she snapped, pointing at me, is destroying the integrity of our Lakeshore community. He refuses to join the HOA, refuses to contribute, refuses to be a good neighbor. If people like him are allowed to run wild, our property values will plummet. Asterisk. The judge's eyes narrowed. Hey, Mrs. Carmichael, property values are not illegal. Argument. Asterisk. Her cheeks flushed crimson. She opened her mouth again, but her lawyer quickly yanked her back down into her seat. Asterisk. Janet sat in the gallery, her binder balanced on her knees. She'd promised to attend, not as a witness yet, but as a moral anchor. When the judge asked if anyone had supporting evidence, she rose like it was rehearsed. Asterisk. Your Honor, she said, I have documented proof of Mrs. Carmichael's repeated harassment of Mr. Hale and other residents. I also have records of her operating illegal short-term rentals in violation of county ordinances. Asterisk. The courtroom went still. Brenda's lawyer shuffled papers furiously, but the damage was done. Asterisk. Judge Wilson leaned back, sighing through his nose. I see this case is not as straightforward as presented. Mr. Hale, Mrs. Carmichael, I am scheduling a continuation. In the meantime, Mrs. Carmichael, you are ordered to cease any further action against the defendant until this matter is resolved. Asterisk. Bang, gavel down, case paused, not ended. But to me, it felt like a small victory. Asterisk. As we filed out of the courtroom, Brenda brushed past me. She leaned close enough for me to smell the sharp perfume clinging to her blazer. Asterisk. You think you've won? She hissed. This is only the beginning. Asterisk. I didn't reply, just met her eyes, calm as I could muster. Because for the first time, I realized something important. She wasn't in control anymore. The courthouse door swung open, sunlight pouring in. I stepped out, breathing deep, and felt the knot in my stomach loosen. Asterisk. The fight was far from over. But now the battle lines were clear, and I wasn't standing alone. For weeks after that first hearing, my life settled into a strange rhythm. By day I worked fixing up the cabin, mowing the scraggly grass, patching the dock where planks had started to rot. By night I prepared for war. Stacks of documents covered my kitchen table, tax records, old letters from my grandfather, photos of family barbecues by the lake, evidence, proof that this land was mine. Asterisk. Janet became my partner in the fight. She'd show up every evening with her binder and her laptop, coffee in one hand and determination in the other. We'd sit until midnight cross-referencing laws, searching through county records, building a wall of facts that Brenda's lawyer couldn't knock down. Asterisk, you know what this is, Marcus, Jeanette said one night, tapping her pen against the binder. It's not just about land, it's about power. She thrives on controlling people, and you're the first to tell her no. That's why she's obsessed. Asterisk, I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Yeah, well, she picked the wrong guy. Asterisk, the truth was, I still wasn't sure I believed that, but I wanted to. The second hearing came faster than I expected. Same courthouse, same judge, same tension crackling in the air. But this time, something had changed. Asterisk, Janet wasn't just in the gallery. She was at the table beside me, officially added as co-counsel. She wasn't a lawyer, but the judge had granted her the right to present evidence as a representative of affected residents. That alone rattled Brenda. Asterisk, the proceedings began with Brenda's lawyer presenting a new angle that my property, though technically outside the HOA's boundaries, benefited from HOA's services and thus should fall under their governance. Asterisk, Judge Wilson raised a single skeptical eyebrow. And what services exactly do they provide for Mr. Hale's property? Asterisk, there was a pause. Papers shuffled. The lawyer cleared his throat. Well, the community patrols, the maintenance of the lakefront aesthetics, the asterisk, the broken lights, the potholes, and the trash bins that are always overflowing. I cut in. Because last I checked, I take care of my own property, and I don't see a dime of their help. Asterisk, a ripple of laughter rolled through the small crowd in the gallery. Even the bailiff smirked. Asterisk, Brenda's cheeks burned crimson. She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut steel. Asterisk, then Janet stood, calm, composed, every movement deliberate. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence of Mrs. Carmichael's misuse of association funds. Asterisk, Brenda's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Asterisk, but Janet was already walking toward the bench, binder open. Bank records obtained through county filings. They show large sums of HOA funds being funneled into Mrs. Carmichael's personal accounts, labeled as consulting fees. We also have testimony from 3 residents prepared to come forward. Asterisk, the judge studied the documents for a long moment. His face didn't change, but the silence spoke louder than anything. Asterisk, finally, he said, Mrs. Carmichael, do you have an explanation for this? Asterisk, Brenda sputtered, her hands clutching the arms of her chair. That's taken out of context. I was reimbursing myself for expenses, hosting meetings, buying supplies. Asterisk, Janet's voice cut like a blade. Expenses that include a weekend at the Grand Shores Resort. Asterisk, the room went still. Brenda froze. Asterisk, Judge Wilson sighed, removed his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. We will investigate these claims further. But this is troubling. Asterisk, for the first time, Brenda looked small. Not weak, no. She was still dangerous, but small. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering furiously, da-da-da. But the confidence she'd worn like armor was cracking. Asterisk, and for the first time I felt something. Dangerous stir inside me. Hope. After the hearing, Janet and I stepped out into the courthouse parking lot. The air was crisp, the sun sliding down toward the horizon. Asterisk, you saw her face, Janet said, almost laughing. She's bleeding. Asterisk. I wanted to believe it. But I knew enough about Brenda to know she wouldn't go. Quietly. She's not done, I said. People like her never are. Asterisk, Janet's smile faded. She nodded. Then we make sure we're ready. Asterisk, I thought back to my grandfather, to the stories he used to tell me about building the cabin with his own hands, about fishing the lake at dawn. He'd fought in a war, then spent decades carving out a little piece for his family. And now here I was, fighting to keep it. Asterisk that night, sitting on the porch with the crickets singing in the trees, I made myself a promise. Asterisk, I wasn't just going to defend the land, I was going to finish this war once and for all. The weeks that followed felt like a storm building on the horizon. Every day the tension grew thicker. Every night I wondered what Brenda's next move would be. She wasn't the type to lick her wounds and retreat. No, she was plotting, waiting for the right moment to strike back. And then she did. One gray morning, I stepped out onto my porch and found an envelope tucked under my door. Inside was a letter from Brenda's lawyer, a cease and desist order claiming I had defamed her by spreading lies about the HOA and her leadership. It demanded I retract my statements and pay damages. Asterisk, I laughed out loud. She's really grasping at straws now. Asterisk, but Janet didn't laugh. She read the letter twice, her jaw tightening. Marcus, this is her last card. She can drag you into a defamation suit. She buys herself time. Time to cover her tracks. Time to scare the others into silence. Asterisk, she was right. Brenda's power had always been rooted in fear. If she could make an example of me, she'd keep her grip on everyone else. Asterisk, that night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the stacks of evidence we'd gathered, pictures of invoices, copies of checks, witness statements. The proof was all there. But it wasn't enough just to defend myself anymore. I had to go on the attack. The final hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. By then, the courtroom had become a stage, and the whole community was watching. Neighbors filled the gallery. People Brenda had bullied, fined, and threatened. For months, they came not just to support me, but to see justice, maybe for the first time. Asterisk, Brenda walked in like a general marching onto a battlefield. A perfect suit, perfect hair, chin high. But her eyes gave her away. They darted left and right, restless, unsettled. Asterisk, her lawyer stood and began the usual theatrics, painting her as a victim of slander, a misunderstood leader, unfairly targeted by a disgruntled homeowner. I almost smiled. The act was wearing thin, and everyone in the room knew it. Asterisk, when it was my turn, I stood slowly, my palms flat against the table. Asterisk, Your Honor, I began. I never wanted this fight. I came here to live quietly, to honor the home my grandfather built. But I was pushed into this battle because Mrs. Carmichael tried to take what was never hers, and I wasn't the only one. Asterisk, I nodded toward the gallery. Dozens of faces stared back, people who had suffered under Brenda's reign. This isn't just about me. It's about an entire community tired of being extorted and silenced. Asterisk, Janet rose beside me, sliding the final piece of evidence onto the judge's bench. Bank records, again, but this time with a signed affidavit from a former HOA treasurer who had come forward at the 11th hour. He confirmed everything. Brenda's embezzlement, her personal spending, the threats she used to keep him quiet. Asterisk, the room buzzed with whispers. Brenda's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a wave of his hand. Asterisk, Mrs. Carmichael. Judge Wilson said slowly, it appears this association under your leadership has been grossly mismanaged. I am ordering a full audit of the HOA's finances, effective immediately. Until then, you are suspended from any leadership role. The words hit like a thunderclap. Brenda shot to her feet, her voice trembling with fury. This is outrageous. I've built this community. You can't strip me of my authority. Asterisk, the judge's gavel cracked against the desk. Sit down, Mrs. Carmichael, or I will hold you in contempt of court. Asterisk, for the first time, Brenda obeyed. She sat, and in that moment, all the power she had clung to evaporated. After the hearing, neighbors surrounded me outside the courthouse. Some shook my hand, others hugged me, a few even had tears in their eyes. Janet stood at my side, her face lit with quiet triumph. Asterisk, you did it, she whispered. Asterisk, I looked back at the courthouse doors, where Brenda had stormed out moments before, her lawyer trailing behind like a shadow. No, I said. We did it. All of us. Asterisk, the truth was, the fight wasn't over. There would be audits, lawsuits, maybe even criminal charges. Brenda wasn't going to disappear overnight, but the tide had turned. Her grip was broken. Asterisk, that evening, I went down to the dock. The lake was calm, the sky painted in shades of orange and gold. I cast my line into the water and breathed in the silence. For the first time in months it felt like peace. Asterisk, I thought of my grandfather, of the legacy he had left me. I knew I'd honored it not just by protecting the land, but by protecting the people who called it home. The war was over, and for once, I'd won. Asterisk, and that's how justice finally caught up with Brenda. For so long, she thought she could bully and control everything around the lake. But in the end, the truth won. Marcus walked out of that courtroom free, with his land and his peace finally restored. Asterisk, what do you think was the punishment fair? Or did Brenda deserve even more? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. Asterisk.